Welcome to the Innovation Storytellers podcast. We talk to innovators and disruptors in R&D, product managers, entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs, innovation thought leaders, and their storytellers who help bring their amazing ideas to life. Now, here's your host, Innovation Storyteller, CEO, speaker, and coach to the world's top innovation teams, Susan Lindner.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Lindner, and I'm your host of Innovation Storytellers. For the last 20 years, I've been helping innovators and disruptors to tell their stories. 10 acquisitions and hundreds of innovative products and countless hockey stick growth curves up and down, and even seeing new categories emerge. I wanted to share how great innovations and great innovation leaders get to their finish line using stories to pave the way. I'm really excited to have with me today two incredible executives and innovators from different walks of life. And we're going to be looking at a conversation today about how external minds and internal minds help drive incredible opportunities in innovation. So I'm very excited to introduce you to Yves Pitton, who is the CEO of VTX. And also Kev De Silva, who is an entrepreneur and founder of Ideate Plus, a consulting firm here, actually in Switzerland. And Kev is also very excited to tell us that today is his last day in the corporate world, making the big push into entrepreneurship. So welcome both Yves and Kev to the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks for having us, Susan.
I'm just, giving a very brief overview, but I'd actually love it if you could tell us a little bit more about each of your backgrounds and how you kind of got to this place where you are now, when you think about your own path to innovation. And Yves, I'll start with you.
Okay, very good. So, I'm the CEO of VTX Telecom. VTX is a Swiss-wide telecom operator, a company that was founded 30 years ago by three guys who wanted to change the rule of the game back then. I took over this company 5 years ago in a pretty complex situation and context with a turnaround situation. The company was losing money and had to reinvent itself. And so that was a major challenge over these last 5 years. Myself, I'm an engineer. I'm passionate about technology and I like, cool stuff. I like gadget and I'm a geek. I like things, that are a little bit changing the world. And by design, I'm Swiss. But I did spend a lot of time, abroad across Europe, spend 4 or 5 years in the US in the Silicon Valley. I've been working, in different places. And what I like is challenges where we need, just to rebuild a team. We need just to address major issues and reshape something new. So I like, to build team and to try just to go for something, that others believe is might be a real challenge. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we discovered with VTX. And that's, the cool stuff that happened over these last 5 years.
Yeah. And Kev, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background as well?
Yeah, sure. So as Susan said earlier, I'm Kev De Silva. I'm the founder and CEO of Ideate Plus. Ideate Plus is a company that's very passionate about what I call enterprise innovation. So I'm sure you'd be asking, what is enterprise innovation? Quite simply, I believe that every employee firstly can innovate and secondly should innovate in order for the company to grow. So my story starts with, I'm a Swazi, so part Swiss, part Aussie. And my story starts with, I guess when I first moved into Nestle, I had a question that was banging in my brain, which was, can innovators or can our employees be great innovators? And I did a lot of research at the time. It was 8 years ago. And the research that I did was kind of inconclusive. There was some methods of thought saying, yes, of course, employees would be great innovators because they understand the complexities of our business and they also understand our clients and customers. Mm. Well, there's another thought was saying, innovation is a very precise field and, functionally what we like is an R&D department looking at it. Or maybe we can acquire that acquisition from the outside because our employees have got too much work to do as it is. So they can't actually expand further. So basically, I didn't like any of those ideas or didn't think it was conclusive enough. So I went to the Nestle CIO and I said, look, I've got this problem and, I'm not happy with the solution. So I would like to test something within Nestle and see whether our employees can actually be those great innovators. And he came back to me and he said, look, I like your problem statement And, I also, like your solution to test. However, I will give you one thing and I won't give you two things. And I said, okay, hit me with the bad news first. What won't you give me? And he said, first, I'm not going to change your position. You've got to do it. You've got to influence the people, not on authority, but just on your influencing skills and actually, teaching them the new ways of working. And I said, okay, no problems with that one. What's the second, bad news? He said, well, you're not getting any budget. And I had my budget all, ready, and it was the next slide on the presentation. But then again, because I trusted him, he was, a down-to-earth South African gentleman. And, he had he managed to do some great things at Nestle. So I trusted him and I said, okay, you know what? I won't do this with any money either. And then I said, now give me the good news. And he said, well, the good news is that, you will get support. And so with that support, what it helped me to actually do was actually work in a very agile way. So I had to influence people and convince them of what I was doing and my vision. At the same time, I didn't have any money. So I would actually just try and pick little pieces of, iterations and then deliver them in small batches. And it actually set up the agile way at Nestle in their IT section way back, 8 years ago and followed through. So since that time, I set up a program called Ingenious, and it's a massive program within Nestle. It's as popular amongst the people as famous brands of Nestle. And it's got a following of 65,000 odd employees now. And they've actually delivered around 70 solutions.
Wow.
Yeah. And some of those solutions are actually external facing as well. So markets have gone out and put products in the marketplace. And then the majority of the solutions are inwardly looking and trying to improve the greenhouse before you actually put it out there. So based on that, that's, as Susan said, I'm now sort of entering into the entrepreneurship field because I want to really help other businesses like Yves in terms of their journey of innovation as well.
So I guess you've proven your hypothesis, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so Harvard Business School, if you're in SAYAD, if you're listening, it's time to bring on the case study and to solve clearly, quickly, that yes, employees can be innovative. All employees can innovate, right? That is the message.
I think it's great to know that employees can play a role in the future of the company. That's probably the best message and the best engagement and the best commitment from the management to say, yeah, you can play a role and let me help you, find a way actually in the roots on that. When I'm listening to you, Kev, that reminds me a lot of stuff that I lived in my past. And from an innovation standpoint, one of the biggest challenge was not to create great ideas, but how do you translate these great ideas into something that goes to life? And this notion of, the split and the breakout you have, or the cliff you have between innovation and product management and how, you go through, you end up, with trillions of great ideas that goes nowhere. And so this notion of, what Kev helped us doing was really to get the best out of the brain of everyone within the company and to get commitment, to get engagement, to get a sense of ownership. And, the power of people, when they feel, oh, this is coming also from me. I'm contributing to writing this new chapter of the company. This is a driving force that goes over everything you can think of. And therefore, this big notion of not having a pure functional way in terms of process and in terms of value chain, but, linking all the organization and having, a way through the organization is extremely powerful. But then it's not easy to put that in motion and to find a way to get that. And that's, where what Kevin and his team just helped us doing. That was a massive exercise. And as I said, I'm a strong believer in this notion of a hybrid model where you can really put the best of the two worlds together. I think innovation is never easy to achieve. And it's not about, crazy ideas of some people on the side. It's really about, finding the way to understand, what are the problem statements? What are the topics you want to have the people focusing on? And how you put, this in motion so that, you help people go into a direction, that is making sense for the company and just let as much freedom and empowerment as you can. And these things, when well managed and well thought through, is a school of life where you help people to understand that it's okay to make mistakes. It's totally okay to make mistakes. You cannot be true. And these trial and errors and getting through the process of shooting ideas, testing ideas and validating and having hypotheses and all these processes creating a lot of value, bringing a lot of value internally.
So start us from the beginning. So you and Kevin met, and then what was it that you specifically wanted, Kev to do when he came on board at VTX?
I think if you put VTX back in its context, VTX has been always a small player in the Swiss telecom market and has been, from the first day, a kind of a players that tried to change the rule of the game. So there's been a lot of innovation in the past, but, the market changed, the people change. This is a context that is tough. The telecom market is extremely aggressive. Competitive forces are very strong. You need to be big if you want to invest, so cycles are getting shorter. Capital investment required, is getting to the roof. We are small, so you have less opportunities to get return on investment. So how do you solve this kind of challenge? So it's like an equation, that is hard to resolve. And when we were discussing with Kev, we were talking about the experience he had with Nestle. We talked a lot about, how crowdsourcing from an innovation standpoint and how, we can extract the brain and download the best ideas and extract the brain from the people in a positive way, in a positive sense, and give them the power to contribute. And that means a lot because that means you need to help them get confidence in themselves. So it's a lot about soft skills. It's a lot about, what Kev was talking about, management by persuasion. And it's tough because sometimes, people say, but you're the boss. So if you're the boss, you should tell me what I'm supposed to do. And I'm not hiring smart people to tell them what they have to do. I want to be able to put challenge on the table and I want them, just to find the right way to create value and get out of all the stuff we do today. So it's a lot of philosophical change within VTX. And that was the most challenging aspect of it.
Yeah. So, you came in with a very different mindset, right, to VTX first and saying, okay, I know I'm here to make change. But the other is creating a culture change, right? What you're talking about is getting people to shift from being order takers to now being the head chef, right, of their own domain. And you're also asking them to contribute ideas with the knowing that if you ask people for ideas, you had better fulfill on them, right? Because there's nothing more demotivating than telling your best employees, give me all of your best ideas, and then I'm going to ignore them, right? That is mistake number one in in-sourced innovation from your team. And I hear this on the podcast over and over again of, people gave us great ideas and then we weren't able to execute on them and we lost some of our best people. Those have been lessons learned on these internal innovation endeavors. How do you set the boundaries so that the employees know you're going to take my ideas and there's a priority order of how we actually execute on them?
I think it's a good question. It's not an easy one, I have to say. I think the first thing is when we ask people for either feedback or ideas, it's not a commitment that everything that's going to be put on the table will be executed. So we want to make sure, that we tolerate risk, but also, there are criteria on the way, we want just to shape the future. So that has been, I think, maybe some of the aspects that needed to be appropriately tackled at the beginning. But apart from that, I don't know what you think, Kev, about, the beginning of the story. I think maybe one last comment on that, maybe one more thing. I think the biggest challenge I had at the beginning when I joined VTX was this centralization of information and decision power. And I felt, that people had great ideas, but were frustrated about, we have always done it like this. Or if I give feedback, nobody cares. Or not the way, that I would like it to be. And so I needed to find a way to create credibility for the management to say, we are not doing marketing blah, blah, or innovation bullshit. We want to be serious about that. And therefore, if we believe, there's something to be done and through the innovation process and the crowdsourcing, then we deliver and we create something good. I commit that actually I will support that and we will put the money. And of course, things are always challenging, during the process. But at the end of the day, and Kev, you can say a lot about that. We had 3 great ideas and people, they fought for their ideas. That was amazing what they did. The pitch they did, was just astonishing. And at the end of the day, that was so good that we decided to fund and to finance the 3 ideas, not only one, because we said, we should go for that. We should go for that. And so once this is starting and one they say, oh, Yves is very serious about that, there's something happening, then, that's creating a lot of traction internally. And then we could see, all the best people who were contributing to that. But then if we screw up the process, or if at the end of the day, we're not serious and we don't execute on some of these great ideas, or we cannot just explain why we're not doing it, then it's probably even worse than doing nothing.
That's right.
It's really, a lot about, are we serious about doing that? And what does it mean for the company and for the people?
Kev, what's your take?
I remember our first conversation around it, and there was two things that really stuck out in my mind. The first one, as Yves said, was the commitment to innovation by the management. And so, we were always focused on actually helping them all the way through to actually implementing an idea as well. And we managed to do that in, quite a small space of time when you count holidays and the rest. We still managed to do that in 3 months. And that's from defining a problem to actually, implementing a proof of concept or a minimum viable product. So that was one thing. And then the people always knew what was happening next. And I think that helped as well. There was no real lull in a period where people didn't know where they were. The other thing that I remember was Yves wanting to, work out through the crowdsourcing part who the innovators were. He knew he had a very talented team. However, he wanted to see who was popping out of that innovation process. And that's where, the application that we developed also helped. And the great communication that I had with, and I need to mention the innovation champion that Yves picked as well, because I really think that is crucial for any company to actually decide on an innovation champion. It should be a real change agent for the business. It should be someone who is trusted by the management, but also trusted by the employees and has great communication skills. And in Yves' case, it was a gentleman by the name of Greg, who was our innovation champion, and he was fabulous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So powerful, right? So what I heard you say was, number one, identifying an innovation champion internally who will kind of be our cheerleader and our great communicator. Number two is do not allow for lulls in communication, leaving employees wondering what's really happening with all those ideas that we submitted. And also being forward looking in your storytelling and saying, here's the next step of the process. And here's what happens in the event it's not going so great, right? That communication also rings true because that vulnerability is honesty and trust. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think the last thing I heard you say is that this is really where you begin to see a flip in the culture. If I'm drawing a conclusion correctly, is the excitement that builds and the faith in the management when you say, wow, here are 3 ideas that have come out of this process, and they're all so damn good that we're going to execute on all 3 of them. And I love this last piece that you mentioned is using innovation as an indicator of leadership. Who are those individuals who are willing to kind of take up the banner and say, I am going to fight for this brand new idea? And those are some of the leadership qualities that we want to see in general, much less in just an innovation function, right? People who are willing to die on the battlefield for their innovation are the ones who are really going to take a company forward. The one thing I didn't ask you is, what were these 3 innovations? What got you so excited that you couldn't say no?
I think it's very different ideas actually that came out, the brain and the process. One, was rethinking massively the way we want to interact with customers and with partners and try, just to find a way to smooth and have a seamless way of interacting with them in the way to sell services and solution, in the way to provision, to manage the services. And therefore, that seems like, a very simple things to change, like an e-store or something like this. But, that's changing radically, the way we operate internally and the way we open up our own tools and we give these tools to the partners, to the clients. And therefore, there's a little bit of a delegation of activities. And so we change the role in the value chain. So the first idea was really thinking about an e-store for some specific services and rethinking the segmentation of product and services that will go through different distribution channel, different go-to-market strategy. So that was one. Another one, which has been, more, I would say, tricky for us as well, was to have a very smart notification system. In the way we have a lot of services, It's a production grade operation on everything from A to Z, in the telecom space. But then we wanted just to be very proactive in the way we could communicate with customers that would be either impacted or in the region of some services that we manage that would have, distortion, maintenance, and other stuff. So we wanted to totally rethink the way we connect the communication path to the client with, let's say, the plumbing of our operation, which is, this is the two extreme of our operation. And we wanted to connect that in a way that could be making a lot of sense in a very dynamic way of assessing that. And the third one was even more challenging for us. That's totally and radically changing the customer lifecycle and the way we look at customer experience across VTX from the first touch point up to the last one that we hope never happen when they leave us. And thinking about not only that as a philosophical way of changing that, but thinking of the tools and the process and the way we can help them to do cross-selling, just to manage churn and rethink, the way people look at the customer experience. So that was a massive experience that was starting, a massive initiative that was starting internally inwards, focus first to better, transpire or sweat in the way that could impact the experience of the customers. That was one of the projects I would say people said, that's too big. And the one thing, that actually we have been able to do and probably only with the support of Ken and the team was to slice and dice the things in matters that could make sense and to have it in a manageable way. So it's something, that will continue to evolve. But I think at least, the seed is in the brain and the stuff is starting to evolve. And that's exactly what we need to do. And then, we start to have the drive from the people internally. That's the best we can think of. That's the dream.
Right. That is the momentum that every innovation needs, right? To get it all the way through to the end. And I think it's fascinating how you and Kev work together because so often people look to consultants and say, I need help with this. I don't know exactly how to get it done. And Kev, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your process of how, when you're working with, this is a telecom company, right? I mean, we think of it as a utility. We think of it as a must-have service. And yet there's a lot of competition, right? I mean, you are looking at markets, especially when you're in a turnaround situation where you can feel, as we say in New York, the hot breath of competition on your neck. I know in the building where I had my offices, there were 7 PR firms in my building. There was one that was I was on the 7th floor. They were on the 8th floor. I could have screwed a hole into the ceiling and listened to the conversations. But you feel it every day. When you're working with someone on the outside, how do you also make these innovation decisions in light of the bigger market forces? Even knowing when you're in the midst of change, how do you figure out which are the ideas that lead first?
It's not so much about the ideas that's important. It's to actually have a trust in the partnership. And for VTX to know that, Ideate Plus brought an expertise around an innovation process, that was really important because VTX had all the expertise in the vertical of telecommunications.
Right.
So all they could do is trust us with the process, and that really helped. The other thing that really helped was, actually saying it's okay to fail. And I was actually pushing for a culture of failure. And it's a very hard sell to make, but Yves understood it straight away. And that means if you haven't actually, and actually to look to promote people and look at remunerating them based on their failure rate and the velocity of failure. Because if they haven't failed, chances are they haven't tried anything. And if they haven't tried anything new, the business is not flowering either. So it's really those two topics that we discussed.
I'm looking at this picture of Einstein behind you, and I'm reminded of his favorite quote, when you stop learning, you start dying.
Yeah.
And part of that learning process is really being able to manage failure. But you know what? I have yet to see a P&L or a revenue projection or a quarterly plan that has a budget for failure.
I hope it'll come. It's my mission to make it, to just make people aware of it and the importance of failing and learning from that failure. So I hope it will come.
But, I think the budget for failure is probably in most of the P&L. The only thing is nobody accepts that. And there's not a specific line. But, when we start talking about probability, base case, worst case and budgeting and all that, it's factoring something, without always saying that's what we mean. And so, favoring, failure, assuming there's a couple of success between failures, that would help, of course. But it is a massive change in the culture. And, for us and for my team here, we're Swiss. We don't like to fail. We like good watches, and a watch needs to be extremely reliable and solid, etc. So it's a different mindset. But even, when you build watches, it's okay to make failures. And so it's only the end product that needs to be perfect. But along the way, it's totally okay, just to test and to hit the wall here and there. I think the only thing that we don't like is to make twice the same mistake, because that means the organization and the people are not learning. But, failing and taking, understanding what's happening and walking around and extracting, learnings from the mistakes is what's differentiating, a great smart company with, a good follower. Maybe sometimes it's good to be a follower, but I think it's less sexy. And in the field where we're active now, I think it's not enough. It's not enough.
Yes. So Yves' team was really fantastic when it came to the user testing. So, as part of the rapid innovation process, in there is constantly, this user centricity and actually going out there and putting your prototype to the end users. And in some cases, the end user was an end customer out there as well. And the team really, they were a little bit afraid or a bit reluctant at first, but then they overcame that. And actually, through knowing the trusted process that we taught them, they realized the importance of that. And that came back in a lot of the survey results that we actually did with them as well, to talk about the user centricity, to talk about why they should always be doing that. That's kind of a definition of failure as well, because, you're scared, basically. It's fear.
And, I had people, coming to me and said, hey, Yves, what do you think of that? Do you think it's risky, or should we go for that? And they were by design asking me to say, can you please take a decision on this one, so that in case we fail, it's not my fault. And we had, very interesting discussion. I said, what do you think? Should we go for that? Why should we go? And what are the kind of risk we're taking? And what if we fail? What would we learn? Would that mean that actually it would help us to be better afterwards? If we don't have enough budget to do everything we want to do, wouldn't it be better actually to fail fast, so that we know and we reroute and then we correct and we go through this iteration that end up, helping us going into the right direction? But, the beginning was funny sometimes. It was funny. And that was also probably also on their side, a way to test whether I wanted to stay in full control from A to Z or not. And I'm totally fine. Of course, it's never funny, just to fail. We would prefer just being extraordinary and having, being a genius from the first idea to the last one. It's just unfortunately not the case. And so, going through this process was also very enriching in the way to discover people internally that I didn't know that well, and that actually ended up being tremendous contributors.
And I can't think of a more boring story, since we're talking about innovation storytelling, than we had an idea, we built it, it was a massive success. The end.
Oh, yeah.
No late night. Nope, we got it the first time around. There's
I think it wouldn't be true anyway. And I think they will probably need, somebody to help them driving innovation. And probably they would need somebody, just to help on the communication, because it's probably not true at all. It doesn't reflect what's happening within the company. So I think being honest is also, a way I think it's important to have trust and respect, and showing the weaknesses we have, showing the doubts we have. It's part of this, management style where it's not a Fortune 100 where, there's only one guy, you never talk to him. It's an open door policy. You can talk about the stuff that you have in your mind. You have great ideas. You can just pop up in the office and say, why don't we think about that? And that's part of the trust and respect that is required. I think if you don't have that, such a process would be challenging. Probably there would be an additional steps in Kev's process to first put in place the required foundation for being able to drive that.
And I think that vulnerability is that piece that unlocks trust and courage, right? Until you actually say where the problems are, where the challenges are, you will not muster the courage to actually solve them. And you certainly won't get other people on board who will volunteer to help you, right? You admit that there's a challenge involved. And when we come to that admission, people go, wow, now I can talk about what's challenging for me. So I will say this though, Yves, you have the lofty title of CEO. What happens when you're a middle manager and you're like, hey boss, I'm working on it. I'm just really deep in the failure right now. And I know you'd be so proud of me because I'm failing quarter after quarter, but we're almost there. So when do you put the kibosh? When do you say, okay, enough is enough? We have to abandon ship. Let's figure out when to say stop.
I think it's a very interesting question. From what I can see, it never happens because if you select the right people, if you have the right change agent and the right innovation champion, they exactly know, when it's outside of the frame or when there's doubt. And so there's a kind of a self-regulation mechanism that is never forcing us, just to say, hey, I think it's going too far away. I was joking, we should stop now. We have played enough. It's never happened like this. And from what I can see, the most important steps probably before driving this is agreeing on what we want to achieve, not in the sense of what we want to develop, but what are the kind of problem statement we want to address. And I think once this is done, then we can let a lot of freedom. And when things that are being created and innovation ideas that are coming to life are not solving the problem that was designed at the beginning, of course, you don't have to say anything. They just realize the same way as we do. And so I think it's a little bit about, the importance of the first steps to make sure the foundation of the process is well thought through. And that's where Kev and the team helped us a lot because, emotionally speaking, we are day in, day out in some of the aspects and challenges we face. And sometimes it's good, just to have somebody forcing us to step back and say, but tell me a little bit more about that, and what you mean by that. And are you sure that actually that would mean, and when you compare this to this, how would you rate that, and why this instead of that? Because from that outside, I thought that actually some of the challenge was this, right? So stepping back and agreeing to have an open discussion on defining, this problem statement was, I think, a very important step.
And then looking further down the process, Susan, when we got to the implementation, 2 of the projects actually had a product backlog, and each item within that product backlog had an acceptance criteria. So you would never have the case that you actually reflected earlier because the product manager was well aware on a daily basis on how they were sitting in terms of the project. And you can't bullshit about that because it's on Jira, it's available for everyone to see. So, and that actually creates a sense of trust that, Yves set up within the ecosystem as well to say, I'm not going to come to you and ask you because, it's out there anyway and you manage it. So everything was broken up with acceptance criteria and everyone would know where it was in that acceptance criteria.
Well, then I'd like to pose a question to you both. So one of the chapters in my book, Innovation Storytelling, starts off with this what if scenario. Right? What if, Mr. Westinghouse had walked over to Thomas Edison when he was on attempt number 7,281 of making the light bulb, right? We all know it took him to get to 10,000 tries for the light bulb to actually be created. But what would have happened if Edison had been on Jira chronicling each one of the attempts of his light bulb for years, right? Trying to get this right and saying, I haven't failed, 10,000 times. I have just learned. So we often cite this as like, oh, the brilliance of innovation. I just wonder, Yves and Kev, maybe some of the folks that you've encountered, what would have been like if Edison had been on Jira with all of his teams going, oh, you should try this, or what about that? Or how would it have been different if we had all seen into Edison's process from day one? And by the way, Edison was terrified of corporate espionage. He knew that there were spies in his organization, and he sent out spies to other organizations to see what they were doing. So how do you think about it if old-time innovation would have been as transparent as it is today?
Let me take that one first and then Yves can conclude, I guess. So basically, Edison, like a lot of great innovators, believed in that empirical method of innovating. So it didn't matter if it was set number 7,254 or 9,999. Each experiment and each hypothesis had in his mind, a particular outcome, and that outcome could be measured. So even, hypothesis 1 was just as important as hypothesis 10,000, let's say. So that's my view. What about you, Yves?
I think I agree with you. I think there's not a single way of creating value and innovating. I totally agree with you. And this notion of hypothesis driven and trying just to frame the target and put, type of use case on what's happening on the market, defining, solution that could match based on that, trying to understand also this notion of common denominators so that, if the market goes right or left, you always win, and thinking about the building blocks of the solution we are creating so that, we help put as much innovation and thinking in the process, but we maximize also the chance of impact as something, that I believe is very important. If there would be more transparency and Jira-based management, at the Edison time, I don't know, maybe we wouldn't be, in a video call right now doing what we're doing. But I think, what's happening is step by step, the process are evolving. Innovation is getting more powerful. And I'm maybe just repeating myself, but I think my experience from the past, from an innovation standpoint, it can be very frustrating when you don't engage the people. So Edison had the chance, just to be in a lab and to be, doing R&D. We are doing pretty much the opposite because by stretching the people who do have a functional role, we stretch them, on the agenda. And, from a resource standpoint, it can be more challenging. But once the stuff is rolling, then you maximize the chance of going to the finish line. And that's what we wanted. So we had a dream, and I think we are going there. It has been very exciting.
What you say, Yves, it's not just about the outcome, but it's the people's growth through that outcome and having a real team working on something. That's also very, very important.
From a failure standpoint, for me, it would have been totally okay to end up with no great ideas that we would push to the market, but just having an impact on the people and on the philosophy and the culture internally. That would have been okay. I think we had, the cherry on the pie with great ideas on top of that. But, the process was not about creating innovation. The process was about, changing the way we were behaving internally. That's not something we communicated up front, to the people. We said, we want to innovate. They said, but then, we wanted to see how people would change along the way. And that has been, the most amazing achievement. It's really about the people.
Yves, how did your experience in Silicon Valley shape this approach? And do you find that your approach is similar to other Swiss CEOs that you know or other telecom executives? Or do you think the perspective you took away was unique?
I think it wouldn't be fair to say that, I came with the great ideas and then, that would be exactly the opposite of everything we did internally from an innovation standpoint. I think first, I've been chosen to drive this company, not because, I was a telecom guy. I was not a telecom guy. I'm a technologist. I did work in a lot of different industries. I was a consultant for McKinsey for quite some years. But the one thing, that the board wanted was somebody who can say, what's the future of this company? Where should we be, active? And therefore, it's fine. And that was a risk also on their side. It's fine to have somebody who's not actually purely coming from the telecom space. And so I came with more of an inclusive way of managing things, even if at the beginning, that was a turnaround. So we had to be extremely tough. And that was difficult years at the beginning, up to the moment we started having success. And I think today we're doing good. But that has been a mix where I think from the first day, the trust and the credibility was in the way I wanted to drive change, not because we need to drive change and we need to reduce costs, but because we want to create sustainability. And sustainability means having something that is relevant for the customers we have today, the customers we have tomorrow. And so you need to get ready for that. And so this whole notion was maybe not traditionally Swiss, but I'm Swiss. I understand how things work here. I'm passionate of what, I lived in the Silicon Valley. And I think, again, this notion of mixing of how, we can be more tolerant with risk is probably more coming from my less Swiss side of the brain and the other one. And on the other side, I need to understand how people think and how people work and how, people behave here. And I think I needed to connect and I needed to put the right people at the right place so that we could put a little bit of oxygen in the organization in that way. And that's a little bit more risky for me in the way, I could feel I maximize the chance of impact. But, when the things is coming from the middle management, and that's the point going back to the change agent and the innovation champion, setting the right direction, the philosophy, and then having great people underneath that are driving changes. That's the best thing. They are in connection with everyone at the top of the organization. They can have impact. If you give them the power, then, the victory and the success is there if you pick the right one.
Yeah. And they get to take that with them, right? I mean, that's a feeling that you come to work with every day then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's just huge culture shift. And I imagine the feeling, right? I mean, you can kind of come in the office in the morning and you can feel it as being different. So what's next for VTX? And Kev, I'm curious, as you work as the outsider, kind of holding up the mirror, right, to the company going, I really need you to see yourself so we can make the right changes. What do you see as the next steps for the future of VTX?
So I think on my side, I'm never satisfied with, everything we're doing. I think we could do more. I think there's more stuff, we could address. We have additional great ideas, that came out of this process that we'd like to put in motion. I'm sometimes, frustrated by the complexity, of the operation we are managing and the way we can put that in motion. And if I have one dream, my dream would be to shorten massively the time from ideas to impact and to change, inside the company, everything that is required, just to shorten that, because that's the best way of being very much relevant on the market. And then the other thing is better understanding. And when looking at us in the mirror, really understanding what is so unique in what we do. Sometimes we had discussion at the beginning. It's about proximity. It's about blah, 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 all this kind of thing. But does it really make sense? And how does this translate into real value for the customer? So I think for me, further understanding our strong differentiating factors, and not from pure marketing standpoint, but really what's unique in the skills and the stuff we do, and that having impact is something that I would like to go deeper in understanding and evaluating. And then from that on, launching another process, just to say, how could that translate into the next wave? The next wave of innovation, the next wave of services, the next wave of maybe just the next chapter of the company. And I think there's so many things that can be done, in writing a new chapter of the Swiss telecom landscape. There's so many things that could be done. So there's room for improvement and there's space for that. I think the market is responding very positively to everything we do. So we could do more.
So your team sounds exhausted, Yves. Energized
Absolutely.
and exhausted, just as you want them.
Well, so I guess sometimes they want me just to go in vacation and have, 1 week of, a little bit of a rest. But at the same time, it's amazing to see the people who really made extra hours, who were tired, but so happy. I like to see people, satisfied and excited and addicted about this kind of thing, because this is coming from the gut. This is their own energy. They are not responding because one guy who's the boss is telling them you do that. And you have a way to understand how the people behave and where you should put your bets. Of course, they're a little bit tired, but who's not tired? They are tired for the right reason.
So this is something we were talking about before we started recording, but I think the three of us all share a mutual addiction to innovation. And it sounds like you are trying to get your team members over at VTX equally addicted to innovation. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And we can see already a lot of addiction internally.
Kev, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to share about future looking.
What I would like to see for VTX is for them to actually develop this bimodal process, because it is a big steam engine in the services that they deliver, and you need that steam engine in any company, right? However, it's good to have little speedboats as well to run occasionally these, rapid innovation processes. And once you're comfortable with both of those, I think, VTX will be huge in the Swiss market. And really, my philosophy personally is, to teach people how to fish, because I'm an unusual consultant. I don't want to be stuck, in a particular engagement forever. It's not my goal. My goal is to teach them how to fish so that they can fish by themselves for the next time. And already with VTX, I had some great feedback from the team to say, hey, Kev, it was really cool, what you taught us. And then when you were implementing as well, and now we can take this development, because we've got developers ourselves, and run with it. That was music to my ears.
So your job is to innovate yourself into obsolescence, to become obsolete.
Exactly. And I've always done that also in the corporate world. And I think it's philosophy around, and Yves has this as well, around servant leadership. So we haven't spoken much about the ingenious team that helped out Yves. We were just talking about Ideate Plus, but Ideate Plus is a whole team as well. It's a team of UX researchers, UX designers, and then technology partners. And it's a big team that was actually helping, VTX out to actually fulfill their dreams as well. And I can't say enough about, how proud I am for my team, and how when you take on servant leadership and you just lead in a way to kind of de-block everyone's situations, how, powerful and useful that is.
And it sounds like you really experienced that, Yves.
Oh, yeah. That was great. I think we had very qualified people. They were nice people who could understand us, who were bringing a lot of expertise, not only actually on the process side, but also credibility and expertise on the technology. And I think that was helping a lot internally when creating the teams and the cross-functional team that we wanted to have. So yeah, I think that I totally agree with what Kev is saying. We had a great experience. I think that was a fun moment. That was a lot of fun. And I have to say, when it starts with fun, the probability of having a lot of impact is higher.
So I have a couple of, we call them hot seat questions that I ask all my guests, innovation storytellers. So if I had to ask you the question, Yves, I'll start with you. Innovation is, how do you finish that sentence? What is innovation to you?
Innovation is going beyond.
Going beyond. And what about you, Kev? What is innovation to you?
For me, I've had a little bit more time to think about it. So it's a lukewarm seat. Thanks, Yves. You went first.
Lucky guy.
For me, it's about people and people development.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had to think about your favorite innovation when you look back on history, what is the innovation that still makes you go, wow, what is that?
I'll go first this time and I'll give you some time to think, Yves. Look, for me, it's not about an innovation. It's more about an innovator, okay? And I always, really appreciated the work that basically, let's say, the Da Vinci's achieved as well, because they were living in a time where, it was harder to commercialize their innovations. And some people would say that, they were great inventors because, by definition, innovation is only when you've got commercial viability for your invention. But they're the things, it's the people that I appreciate rather than the innovations, because I don't think there's anything that's really, truly radically innovated. To be honest, it's all incremental in my books. And so I really respect the people who innovated.
On my side, when I start thinking about innovation, and I have one thing in my mind, that was a tough experience. I'm not sure, we talked about that, Kev, but that was one of my previous life. We launched in the innovation team a project that was supposed to be extremely bold. So the project was called Kojak because of boldness. And everything was fine. I think that was an amazing thing, that could solve a very strategic challenge that the group was facing in the TV space. And everything was fine. And we screwed it up because of everything that we did right during the process with Kev, from a roadmap standpoint, from an innovation process standpoint, from an ownership and engagement, lack of capabilities to be supported by the market and get, driving forces to put that in motion. And I think, every time I think of innovation, I reflect back on this experience and what went wrong and what, key success factor in the way to avoid this. And that would be my nightmare, to fall back in the same trap that we experienced last time. And so for me, this whole notion of looking at how innovation could be pushed, could be pulled, or could be supported is a lot easier when, as a CEO, I could put the framework in place and I can manage, political dimension and stuff like this that are happening and power game, because that would be the worst thing that happened in any kind of corporate world. And that would totally kill innovation. So I'm still thinking of the Kojak project had a very specific, a small box. That was a very cool stuff. And I kept it and I have it, in my office at home. And I look at it, at least once a week. And I think about that and how we should think and what we can learn, what we should learn from that.
And that Kojak was like a cable box or some kind of, can you tell us what it is, Kev? Or is it still going to happen?
No, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it was back in 2009. And the idea was just great because when I think back of what we did in terms of defining the problem statement, we looked at one thing, that was challenging. It's one-way television, broadcast TV, where you don't know, what's happening in the set-top box. You have no way to control, the experience. And we designed something very specific that in this kind of legacy world could bring exactly the same experience you would have, in IPTV box. That was just massive, the way that could have changed the whole business. And it just got killed more because of internal fights, corporate policies, lack of support here and there, roadmap ownership and all this kind of thing, and was delayed up to the moment the window was closed. When I learned from that and I look at what's happening within VTX, of course, we would like to be faster. We would like just to put more resources. Sometimes we can, sometimes we cannot. But I think, timing is very important. And therefore, shooting fast, failing fast, testing the market, and if it's a failure, then step back, go ahead and take another one. It's exactly what corporate world was not doing in the past and what Kev has been pushing, within Nestle and in the corporate world. And I think for me, the biggest challenge, if these large corporations are becoming agile, innovative, that's going to be a massive challenge for small and medium companies. Because today, that's exactly this kind of speedboat. We are a small company and we can be a speedboat. Internally, we have also inertia and we have our own speedboat. But, when large corporations are becoming agile, innovative, and do some good stuff, then they can be extremely powerful. So I want to get even faster and more agile than what these guys are doing.
Well, I don't know about my listeners, but I have no doubt that that's exactly the direction that you're headed in. So I'm just so grateful for this hour that we've been able to spend together. And thank you for giving us a really honest and open look at what's going on at VTX and into what happens when you work with, great outside minds and inside minds come together to empower people. I'm just so grateful for the time that we had today. Thank you. If our listeners want to get in touch, if there's anything that you want to share with us, where should we send them? Yves, where should we send folks to find out more about what VTX is doing?
Of course, VTX website is www.vtx.ch, and you end up on the landing page. You can see the contact. People can contact me on LinkedIn or directly actually on the website of VTX. They can call the reception desk and then, they're going to get directly to me. It will be a pleasure.
Wow. Be careful what you wish for there, Yves. You're going to have a fan club starting very soon.
Very good.
And Kev, how can people learn more about Ideate Plus and all the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, LinkedIn is the best place to get hold of me if you really want to get hold of me. And also, if you want to learn about Ideate Plus, it's just ideateplus.com. And the information there, and you will also find the contact details back again to the team through that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. And by all means, tune into innovationstorytellers.com where you can find all the episodes of the podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
This innovation story has ended, but yours is just beginning. Go to innovationstorytellers.com, download the free Innovation Storytelling Blueprint, and sign up to pre-order Susan's book, Innovation Storytelling. Get the resources, runway, and recognition you deserve due out this spring. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until the next innovation story.